can feel like you're just constantly chasing the horizon, trying to keep up with the breakneck speed of technology.
Oh, definitely.
Now, imagine your world also involves government contracts. Suddenly that horizon has, well, a whole bunch of regulatory mountains you need to climb too.
It's a really tough combination.
Yeah.
The pace of IT innovation is just relentless. And then you layer on these strict, often changing federal compliance rules. It can absolutely create a huge bottleneck for organizations.
Right. Well, today we're diving deep into a company that seems specifically engineered to navigate exactly this tricky terrain, Quartermasters FZC. Their whole focus appears to be bridging that very gap, between cutting-edge IT solutions and all the complexities of federal regulations.
Yeah, exactly. And to really get a handle on how they do this, we've pulled together some, I think, really informative sources. We're looking at their public stuff, their about page, the services breakdown, what they offer under supplies. We also found a great blog post that gives some context for their AI work. It compares large language models, LLMs, and small language models, SLMs.
Ah, interesting.
And finally, you've got some excerpts from a Quartermasters Capabilities podcast script briefing. That gives us a bit of insight into how they talk about their own value.
Okay, so our mission today is to really understand how Quartermasters positions itself as that crucial partner for government contractors, agencies, similar organizations. We want to dig into the IT solutions, the support they provide, and, importantly, how their AI capabilities fit into that bigger picture of language model tech. All right, let's unpack this. Who exactly is Quartermasters? What's their sort of foundational mission?
Well, looking at their About page, the thing that immediately jumps out is this mission-driven approach, but also their global operation. Their core goal isn't just delivering IT, it's specifically tackling that intersection, that meeting point between effective tech deployment and the, frankly, absolute necessity of federal compliance in the government space. They really emphasize helping clients not just react, but to strategically plan, execute efficiently, and, keep up a strong security posture.
Yeah, what really struck me was the founder's story, Samara Khan. Her firsthand experience with, the messiness of siloed systems, the constant struggle with compliance across different places, Washington, Dubai, Singapore, Dar es Salaam. It really paints a picture of a genuine, persistent problem she was clearly determined to fix.
Precisely. And the About page stresses that her frustration wasn't about a lack of talent in those places.
No.
It was the systemic hurdles relying on outdated tech, fragmented communication. That's a pain point I think many people in complex multi-site setups, especially those dealing with regulations, can really relate to. It gives a strong why for a company like Quartermasters.
Definitely. And she seems to have put together a team with some serious expertise. You see, Samara herself, background in scalable, secure server solutions, track record of saving money for U.S. government contractors. Then there's Sana Raymond, specializing in AI-driven HR tech, specifically for federal contracting, using intelligent automation to modernize how the workforce gets enabled.
That's right. And Haroon Haider brings that full-stack development and AI automation know-how, which is crucial for delivering cloud solutions. And we shouldn't forget Saeed Uchkaba Hassan, the expert on the supply chain and IT equipment side, making sure logistics are compliant under FAR and DFARS.
FARS, always critical.
Absolutely. It looks like a team designed to cover the whole spectrum of what government contractors really need.
And they've got that global footprint reinforced with offices listed in Dubai, New York, Michigan, clearly defines their target audience too. Federal contractors, government buyers, the agencies themselves.
Which lines up perfectly with the mission, right? Their unique selling point, you see it woven through their materials, seems to boil down to being tech-driven, really rigorously compliance first, and committed to speed. That fast turnaround bit is pretty interesting, given how long things can take in government contracting.
Okay, so we have a pretty good picture of who Quartermasters is. Now let's get into the specifics. What do they actually do? What are these core services and solutions they're offering?
Well, their services page shows a really comprehensive list. I mean, it covers everything from the early stuff like minimum viable product, MVP development, and full-stack web dev.
The basics.
To more specialized things like AI and machine learning engineering, secure mobile apps, essential cybersecurity audits. They even handle things like Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 migrations, and even, dipping into emerging tech like blockchain prototyping. It's a very wide range.
It really is. And I noticed that clear build, equip, comply, upskill framework. That feels like a very neat, very effective way to package their value, rapid MVP dev to get stuff going quickly.
Get it off the ground.
Sourcing ITAR-compliant hardware, and ITAR, the International Traffic and Arms Regulations, that's huge for defense contractors. Getting that compliant sourcing right is critical but tricky.
Super tricky.
And then the vital compliance readiness training.
Yeah, that framework, it directly hits the core needs of these contractors, doesn't it? They need to build fast, get the right and compliant gear, make sure they tick all the regulatory boxes, and then also make sure their teams can actually use the new tech effectively.
And they've got some pretty compelling examples of impact. Reducing hardware procurement cycles by 60% for a defense prime. I mean, that's a massive efficiency gain.
Huge.
And a secure C2 overlay boosting awareness by 45% for an air support squadron. Those are, tangible results, real-world stuff.
Absolutely. And that projection they mentioned about increased federal tech spending identified through their RAG analytics, that shows they understand the market and can offer strategic insights too. If you look closer at their core dev services, you see that focus on speed again, MVP and prototype engineering, custom web and mobile apps, building robust SaaS and API platforms.
Now, the AI chat and automation stuff sounds particularly relevant today. Chatbots, agentic AI, prompt engineering, workflow automation. It really looks like they're leaning into AI for optimization.
And what's interesting there is the range of tech they mentioned using. Open source hubs like Hugging Face. Powerful frameworks like LangChain, the OpenAI API, Llamin Index. It suggests they're pretty adaptable, kind of a best-of-breed approach to AI, picking the right tools for the job.
And their demo and deployment tools list is also pretty extensive. Gradio, Streamlit, Replit, Codespaces. But then the ones that really caught my eye, especially for this audience, Docker and Llama, they specifically call out using these to run AI models locally for better privacy.
That is a crucial point.
Yeah, I imagine that's a huge plus for anyone handling sensitive government info.
Absolutely. The ability to run AI models locally, that directly tackles major security and compliance worries in the federal world. Using Docker and Llama means they offer clients a way to use AI's power without necessarily sending sensitive data out to external cloud services. It gives much more control.
They also cover the essentials, like cybersecurity and compliance audits, pen tests, cloud security, automating compliance workflows, and the foundational IT support, too. Google Workspace, M365 migrations, AI-powered remote help desks, cloud infrastructure setup with automation, self-healing capabilities. It really does feel like a whole package for this sector.
It does. They even touch on digital presence and marketing, vital for any org. Even government contractors need to get their name out there. And business systems engineering, customizing CRMs, ERPs, document automation, data migration, all that critical back office stuff that just needs to work smoothly.
Okay, now that Quartermasters Capabilities podcast script briefing we mentioned, it adds a few more layers. It highlights their new eShop. What's the main idea there?
Yeah, the briefing really emphasizes that this online store is specifically curated. It's IT gear that aligns with federal contract needs. The big advantage seems to be that they've pre-selected products based on what contracts actually demand. Certain laptops, rugged gear that pops up often. It could save contractors a ton of time searching for compliant hardware.
Right. So instead of wading through endless options, you find stuff already vetted as, likely suitable for government work. And the briefing also stresses the traceability and compliance of the products in the eShop. That's non-negotiable in the federal space.
Exactly. Knowing the hardware from the eShop meets those standards, that's huge peace of mind for contractors. It simplifies procurement and cuts the risk of buying something that doesn't meet the rules.
The briefing also kind of shines a light on where Quartermasters fits in the bigger federal contracting picture, mentions they support both prime contractors and subcontractors.
Yes, and that's actually a really important distinction they're making. They're positioning themselves as useful no matter where you are in that contracting food chain. Their help extends to those crucial early stages, like responding to RFIs, requests for information, and sources sought notices. Plus, they offer services like compliance tracking and alerting folks about contract amendments.
Now, here's something that sounds particularly smart. The briefing points out Quartermasters can act as a small business vendor without creating organizational conflict of interest OCI issues for prime contractors.
Ah, yes.
OCI, for anyone unfamiliar, is basically when a contractor's other roles might bias their work or give an unfair advantage. Avoiding OCI is paramount in government deals. This sounds like a big deal.
It is a very big deal. It lets prime contractors use Quartermasters' specialized skills while still hitting their small business participation targets under the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. That's a major plus in a sector where those goals are often required.
And it sounds like they've smoothed out the process of integrating into existing contract vehicles, things like IDIQs, BPAs, GSA schedules. Plus, handling automatic flowdown of DFARS and CUI requirements, and offering surge capacity without adding permanent payroll costs. That's a pretty compelling package for federal players.
Absolutely. It's all about agility, right?
Yeah.
Scaling up or down as needed, plus that assurance of compliance, all without the long-term overhead and those potential OCI headaches.
Okay, let's circle back to their AI capabilities for a moment and connect this to that blog post comparing LLMs and SLMs. What were the key takeaways there? What are the main differences the post highlights?
Yeah, the blog post does a good job explaining that, bigger isn't always better with language models. It clearly lays out the basic difference. LLMs, large language models, have hundreds of millions, even billions of parameters. SLMs, small language models, work with maybe tens to hundreds of millions.
And that size difference has some pretty big consequences, especially for resources, right?
Yeah, exactly. LLMs generally need serious computing power. Often high-end GPUs, maybe distributed servers to run well, which means higher costs. SLMs, on the other hand, are much leaner resource-wise. They can often run on less powerful hardware, even right on your device.
So LLMs give you massive power, broad knowledge versatility, but at a higher cost and needing more horsepower. SLMs might be more focused, but they're way more efficient, potentially cheaper for specific jobs.
That's the gist. LLMs are great for complex, open-ended stuff. SLMs are often a better fit for more targeted tasks, things that aren't as computationally heavy, especially when you need low latency or lower costs. And the blog post also hits on that crucial privacy angle. SLMs are easier to deploy right on a device, keeping data local.
Which ties directly back to Quartermasters mentioning running AI models locally with Docker and Llama. That strategy seems perfectly aligned with the SLM advantages from the blog post, especially for securing sensitive government data.
It really does. While Quartermasters probably taps into the broad knowledge of LLMs via APIs for certain complex things, their focus on local execution strongly suggests they're also strategically using SLMs, where efficiency, cost, and especially data privacy are key. The post even names some leading SLMs like GPT-4o Mini, 5.4, Mistral 7b, Claude Haiku, showing there's real capability in these smaller models now.
And then the blog post also brought up Pieces, that AI companion tool, designed to keep context and work with multiple LLMs but process data locally. It sounds like Quartermasters might be using a similar kind of architecture, smartly blending the strengths of big cloud models and smaller, local ones.
That's a really sharp observation. By using tools that enable local model execution, Quartermasters is essentially giving their clients more control over sensitive data and the possibility of more tailored AI solutions, specifically built for those unique, often sensitive, government contracting uses.
Okay, so as we start to wrap this up, what would you say are the really key strengths of Quartermasters FZC that kind of emerged from our deep dive today?
Well, firstly, I think their core mission, really trying to bridge that gap, navigate those often choppy waters between tech and federal compliance, that's a huge differentiator. They clearly get the specific pain points in this sector. Secondly, the sheer breadth of their offerings is impressive. IT solutions, GovCon support, from initial dev and cyber right through to sourcing compliant hardware. It's very comprehensive.
And they definitely seem to have a solid grasp of the federal landscape's nuances, right? Supporting primes and subs, helping with early-stage RFIs, even thinking ahead about OCI issues.
Absolutely. And their embrace of modern AI tech, likely using that strategic mix of LLMs for broad stuff and SLMs for efficiency and local processing, positions them as a pretty forward-thinking and adaptable partner.
So for government contractors, agencies, anyone in that orbit looking for support that's efficient, compliant, and technologically sharp, Quartermasters seems to offer a really compelling, well-rounded proposition.
Precisely. Their goal seems to be simplifying the complexity, both the tech complexity and the regulatory complexity, so their clients can focus on their actual missions instead of getting bogged down by those hurdles.
So if anything we've talked about today has sparked your interest, I definitely recommend checking out the Quartermasters website. You'll find much more detail on their services, and I'm sure contact info is readily available there.
Yeah, definitely worth a look. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering how complex both the tech world and the regulatory environment are getting, and they're only getting more complex, having a partner like Quartermasters, someone who deeply understands both sides of that coin, might just be essential. Not just for navigating the future, but for actually succeeding in it.